Thanks for joining, everyone. We'll just give it a couple minutes so that people can trickle in. Hi, everyone. I see that you're all joining. We'll just give it another minute or two, and then I'll kick things off. Okay, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Lindsay Amundsen. I'm the Director of Workforce Development for Canada's Building Trades Unions. I will be moderating today's webinar. Today, you will receive presentations and learn more about our Building It Green project from our project partners and our advisory committee. You will hear about the research and work we have done to date, get a sneak peek into the curriculum and training program, and at the end of the webinar, we will provide information on how to enroll for our program. Just some quick housekeeping before we officially kick things off here. We will have an opportunity to answer some of your questions at the end of the webinar. There's a Q&A function in the chat via the Q&A chat, sorry. So feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentations, but we encourage you to hold off and listen to all the presentations prior to submitting your questions. Some of them may be answered throughout the presentations. Once we have concluded all the presentations, we will answer as many questions as possible, respecting everyone's time, of course. And if we can't get to your questions, we will answer them offline, or you can contact us via our website. And finally, everyone that has joined today will receive a copy of this presentation, and we will be recording today's webinar so that you are able to access it at a later date. And now I'd like to introduce Sean Strickland, Executive Director of Canada's Building Trades Unions, who will officially kick things off for us today. Over to you, Sean.
Good afternoon, and thanks very much, Lindsay. On behalf of Canada's Building Trades Unions Executive Board, representing 14 different unions, 60 different trades, and over 500,000 members across Canada, welcome to today's webinar. We're joined today by very many people who have had a lot to do and a lot of input into the program, including journey persons are on the call today, apprentices, external and internal stakeholders. And we wouldn't be here today without the support of ESDC and the funding available through the Union Training and Innovation Program, UTIP. So thank you, UTIP. Thanks to the many people and organizations who are making this program and webinar a reality, including the members of the Building It Green team at CBTU, Lindsay Amundsen, Adriana Hernandez, and Zarina Mujanovic. Thank you very much, Lindsay, Adriana, and Zarina. We also formed a National Apprenticeship Advisory Committee who have had a lot of input into the curriculum that you're going to see a little bit of here today. Climate Industry Research Team, part of this group that we have convened with climate industry research people from across the globe who have done research into the best practices on climate literacy and climate education and building processes to reduce our carbon emissions. SRDC, who is our research partner, and Skill Plan, who is our curriculum and program partner. Thanks to each and every one of you. As you know, our industry gets things done. We build things in partnership with our contractors. Typically, contractors win a job bidding through a procurement process that more recently will have more constructability requirements for reducing carbon emissions than what they would have seen in the past. These new aspects of construction will be taken to one of our almost 200 union management, jointly managed training centers across the country, where our workforce will be trained on things like photovoltaic curtain wall, prefabrication modules, low emission motors, specialty welding, zero waste construction sites, low carbon concrete, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Innovation is always occurring in our industry, and in partnership with our contractors, we use our training centers that are jointly managed by union and our contractor partners to train our workers on how to get things done. That's the how. But what is often missing is the why. In discussions with our members and apprentices, they're asking, why are we doing this? Why are we doing things differently to build buildings and infrastructure? That's where the training comes in. That's where this training comes in. Why is a net zero world so important are some of the questions that we've been receiving throughout the development of this curriculum. What are the implications for construction? And thanks to the unique involvement of our industry trainers, this training has been designed for tradespeople by tradespeople. We know how to do the how. Our members in society are asking why. They want to learn more. They want to learn more how to do better. They want to learn why we need to build things differently to reduce emissions. And why do we need to reduce emissions anyways? Well, many of us know the answer to that question. It's very important for the species, it's very important for the air that we breathe, it's very important for the long-term sustainability of our planet. Those sound like big, lofty goals, but that is really what is at stake. And what is the role that we have to play as union members and as union contractors? That is what our curriculum is about. That's what Building It Green is all about. Welcome to today's webinar and CBTU's approach in collaboration with our partners to build it green. Thank you. Welcome, and back to you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Sean. And now I will take just a brief moment to provide a quick overview of the project before handing it off to my fellow panelists today. The official title of the project, which you can see on your screen, Integrating Climate Literacy into Skilled Education and Training. Can you go back one slide? Sorry. Which is a bit of a mouthful there. So we went through a bit of a marketing exercise and rebranded the program to Building It Green. This project, as Sean mentioned, is funded by the Government of Canada, ESDC's Union Training and Innovation Program. This is a 4-year project to develop climate literacy training and curriculum for apprentices. Now you can go to next slide. Thanks. For apprentices, journey persons, and trade instructors of our 14 national affiliated construction unions across the country. Our project partners include the Climate Industry Research Team, who, as Sean mentioned, are our project partners, but they are a group of climate academics who specialize in trades training and climate change. They've essentially done and conducted an environmental scan and literature review across Canada, the US, and Europe, scanning the globe to see what's out there and gathering best practices, as well as identifying gaps. We have SkillPlan, who are our delivery partners in the design and development of the curriculum, and SRDC, who are responsible for measuring and evaluating impact of the project. You will hear from all of these partners today, including from one of our project advisory committee members as well. Our project works with an advisory committee comprised of 10 national training directors who share their expertise, advice, and guide the project's activities. They have assisted in validating findings, stakeholder engagement, and voicing the industry's needs. These national training directors of their respective unions are responsible for training and work directly with their instructors across the country. This committee has a lot of potential to make significant impact across the country, and we are extremely grateful for their contributions. So now just a little bit about the phases of the project and where we are at. You can go to the next slide. Phase 1 and 2, we have completed these 2 phases of the project, although the needs analysis is ongoing. You'll hear a little bit more on that later in the presentation from SRDC. As for the environmental scan and literature review, this was phase 1 of the project, and as mentioned earlier, the CERT team carried out a literature review and environmental scan to examine climate literacy in the trades training programs in Canada, the US, and Europe. CERT also met with government representatives, employers, trade unions, and green construction advocacy groups as part of its research. They met with over 60 trades trainers around the globe during this phase. And one of the things, and they'll talk a little bit more about the research in their presentation, but one of the things that we found the most interesting in their research is, and as Sean mentioned earlier, is that Canadian trades trainers are already teaching the skills related to net zero and climate change, but this is not being linked with its positive climate impact. So essentially, they are teaching the how. Tradespeople understand the how, but not the why. And so the research found that there is a need for a cultural shift to highlight the positive contribution construction can make to meet our climate challenges, and that our industry is not a barrier, but a solution. So you'll hear a little bit more about the research from CERT in their presentation. The phase 2 needs analysis, which is ongoing throughout the entire project, is being done by SRDC. In the earlier phases of the project, they conducted interviews, focus groups, and surveys with apprentices, journey persons, and instructors. And really, this was to figure out, like, we've done the environmental scan, we've done the literature review globally, but what do our members want? What are their views on climate change? What are their views on the role of construction in climate change? And what is already being done, or what do they know that is already being done in their trade or with other trades? And these findings really help to inform the specific curriculum and development that we need moving forward. SRDC also conducted individual interviews with green building consultants, developers, subcontractors, engineering and architecture firms, and industry associations as well. And some of the things that we learned through that research is that we need to ensure adequate support of the trades trainers and instructors themselves. Some of the trades have already been doing the training, others have not, and some have, not all, have indicated that they were uncomfortable or not prepared to speak on the topic of climate change in the classroom. So we need to really make sure that we support and empower our trades instructors themselves as champions. We did also find that there are some generational differences in opinion or interest in climate change coming from apprentices and journey persons. So we found that interesting as well, and more on that later when we hear from SRDC. So where are we at now? We are in phase 3 of the project. We've finished a good chunk of that, which is the foundations course, and that will provide apprentices, trainers, and journey persons with a general understanding of climate science. That's really the foundational portion of the project and the awareness piece of the project. And you'll get a sneak peek into the curriculum and the content and skill plans presentation today. Trade-specific materials are also being developed to ensure learners are connecting the dots between their specific trade and climate change issues, green practices. These trade-specific courses will be delivered by trades instructors who have completed our Train the Trainer workshop. And additional resources such as toolbox talks and job site materials will also be developed as well. So our team has worked diligently throughout this entire process with apprentices, journey persons, and instructors across Canada. We've conducted focus groups. We're having them take a look at the content. They have input. They're sharing best practices from their trades. And that's all in thanks to the support and engagement of our National Training Directors Advisory Committee. Again, they validated the material, and we've really just made sure that we're consulting with tradespeople on the best approach to adding this material into their existing training. We know that instructors have a lot of curriculum and content to get through, so we don't want to burden them with, a whole bunch of extra training. So we want to make sure it can fit in very well with their existing training, and that's a part of what we're going to be accomplishing through our Train the Trainer sessions, is really working with the instructor to make that happen. Ultimately, we do believe that this project will serve as a recruitment and retention tool for younger generations. And we did find that through the research and through hearing from apprentices that They want to contribute positively, and Building It Green is highlighting the ways that they can do so in their career. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Mike Gordon. He's the Director of Canadian Training with EUA Canada. Mike is a dedicated advocate for the skilled trades and has been active in all facets of apprenticeship legislation, licensing, and interprovincial Red Seal initiatives. He has served on various committees and advisory boards at the provincial and national level as a key resource to both government and industry. Mike holds multiple trade qualifications and specialty designations within the piping industry and has been involved at all levels of training, including design, development, and delivery. In his role as UA's Director of Canadian Training, he and his team work collaboratively with upwards of 30 training centers, serving more than 60,000 members across Canada, ensuring they have access to industry-leading, innovative training and learning approaches that are future-focused, ensuring longevity in an ever-changing dynamic industry. Mike is an advisory committee member for the project, and we are very grateful for that. And I will hand it over to Mike to share his perspective on the importance of this project for the building trades. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, Sean, and the CB2 team. I'm going to speak a little bit about the list of items that you see here on the slide before you and give a little bit of a perspective from a CB2 affiliate, UA specifically, regarding this initiative. Next slide, please. We consider ourselves, and we prove it on a daily basis, our members prove it on a daily basis, that we're industry leaders and stewards of our trade. To be that way, we have to be forward-thinking. We invest in our future, prioritizing the safety, quality, and productivity of our industry through a culture of training. The UA alone invests upwards of $350 million annually in the training of our membership. We provide purpose-driven training. We already invest heavily in the training of our members. The Build It Green initiative training program helps in connecting the dots. None of this training is driven by profit, but by purpose, to prepare our membership for new dialogue and the flexibility needed to transition their existing knowledge, skills, and abilities to other solutions. We can also transition to newer emerging technologies, but let's ensure that there's a place for today's experts and tomorrow's solutions. Existing trades are, in fact, the answer. Next slide, please. We, as a building trades, need to embrace our roles and how important they are, the value. This training that's provided by the Build It Green program, it's not highly technical, not meant to be. We already have that. Each building trade continues to build and grow their training that addresses all the different systems. But the training adjusts the common dialogue that's necessary to put out there an increased awareness of the value that we do bring to the table. And not just for government and industry, but for our members who do this very important work on a daily basis to actually recognize their place. This is one of the key value pieces for us as the UA in the Build It Green program. We've demonstrated as the CB2 through their leadership the opportunities for collaboration and how it can be successful through this project. The building trades affiliates have worked hard and well together, and this project is a testament to us pulling the rope all in the same direction. Not just for recognition, but for the betterment of our workforce, for our employers, for clients, and the public in general. By preparing them, we're ready for all opportunities, no matter what the future holds. Another thought is that we need to, all of us collectively, everybody on this call, and hopefully it sends a ripple effect out this great program, that we need to prioritize our future. And we always preach in the classroom preparation meeting opportunity. There's no such thing as luck. I'll speak for the UA specifically. Our members install, retrofit, service, maintain, commission, recommission, decommission buildings that have the most impact on our carbon footprint. When we talk about natural resources, we're also part of the extraction, refinement, and distribution of these natural resources across the country and across the borders. Innovation brings opportunities, but the abilities of the CB2 trades brings these ideas to fruition. Green isn't something new. There may be new names, new tech, but it's the same science that supports it. Let's not take 2 steps backward before we can progress forward. Final perspective for thought. It's about buy-in. But we all share in this project the details, and we all have a role. We each have families and friends whose future is impacted by the decision-making of everybody on this call and individuals and other associations related to this subject going forward. We have a vested interest in tomorrow and leaving things better than we found them. That's always our goal. And it's been a privilege, and we look forward to the continued support of the CBTU in this and other efforts. Thank you very much, Lindsay.
Thanks, Mike. And thank you again so much for your contributions to the project. It's really appreciated. Now I'm going to hand it over to Dr. John Calvert. He's from the Climate Industry Research Team. Dr. Calvert has a PhD from the London School of Economics and a master's from Western University. Until his retirement in the summer of 2021, he was an associate professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences at Simon Fraser University, where he taught public policy. His main academic research is about work and climate change, with a focus on the contribution that the building trades can make to reducing Canada's carbon footprint. For over a decade, he was co-director of a major research project, adapting Canadian work and workplaces to climate change, funded by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council. Over to you, John, to share some of the work that you and your CERT team have done for the Building It Green project.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. Thanks for your kind introduction as well. And I'm really so pleased that Canadian Building Trades have set up this webinar to give us an opportunity to share our research findings. Let's move to the next slide, actually. Let me begin by indicating that my presentation is based on the work of an international team of academic researchers from English Canada, Quebec, the US, and Europe. I put their names on the screen to give them some credit for the input that they have made to the research of our climate and industry research team. Each of these researchers has brought to the research project a wealth of knowledge about the construction industry and its vocational education and training programs in Europe, the US, Quebec, and English Canada. All of them have been researching the impact of climate change on the construction industry and its workforce in their different jurisdictions for many years. Next slide, please. Our goal, as the slide indicates, is we're interested in finding out what is being taught both in Canada and internationally about climate change in construction training and apprenticeship programs. What are the best practices and innovations in curriculum development and in curriculum delivery? What do these various jurisdictions actually include in their curricula? And what can we learn from this that can be relevant for developing climate literacy modules for the Canadian building trades? Our method has been very much an academic one in the sense of doing a literature review and an environmental scan. But we also did a lot of site visits to various training facilities and extensive interviews, as Lindsay indicated earlier, with trades instructors, unions, employers, government officials, and others involved in Canada's training system. In terms of findings, you've already heard some of them from Sean and from Lindsay. Perhaps the most significant finding is that Canada's Red Seal Trades training system is already teaching construction workers the technical skills to implement net zero construction. As Mike Gordon mentioned, it's teaching the how, but it's not teaching the why. That is the reason that net zero is now such an important priority for the construction industry and their work within it. As Mike Gordon often says, the training system needs to connect the dots. The system is not informing the workforce adequately of the major role that they can play in addressing climate change. However, there are many other findings of our research. Perhaps the most obvious in that regard is that the driving force for industry change, both in Canada and internationally, is public policy. Governments are pushing industry to achieve much higher standards of energy use and GHG emission reductions. And public policy is reflecting what science is telling us. The planet is heating up. 2023 was the hottest year on record, with average temperatures of just over 1.5 degrees Celsius over the pre-industrial period. Buildings and construction are the third largest source of GHG emissions in Canada. Consequently, reducing their energy use and the GHG emissions being produced can make a huge contribution to achieving Canada's climate goals. In Europe, and I want to talk briefly here about our international research, the European Union has adopted ambitious targets and implemented tough legislative measures to meet these targets. The European Union's key legislation is its 2010 Directive on Energy Performance of Buildings and the Directive on Energy Efficiency. Recently, the European Union has enacted also a European Green Deal with a target of 55% reduction in emissions by 2030. Canada's currently is 40 to 45%, so the EU is even being more ambitious than we are. And both jurisdictions are looking at reaching net zero by 2050. Now, recognizing that its construction industry would have to change to meet its ambitious climate targets, in 2010, the European Union initiated a major assessment of the training requirements in all its member countries, and in particular, what labor force development requirements would have to be addressed to ensure that it had a workforce that could deliver the targets it established. This initiative was called Build Up Skills, and it was designed to identify the future knowledge, competencies, and skills necessary for the transition to net zero construction. It asked all the EU member countries to create a national roadmap that would guide their efforts to develop training programs to prepare their workforces for the more challenging work required to implement low carbon construction. Much of its recommendations have already been implemented in the training systems we studied, including in Wales, Scotland, Ireland, Denmark, Sweden, Germany, and Belgium. I would note as well that the Irish curriculum is notable particularly for its comprehensive approach to including climate change material as it relates to the construction industry in their curriculum. And we've learned a considerable amount from that. The European research, to summarize, it indicates that implementing net zero requires higher levels of knowledge, skills, and competencies, but also a deeper knowledge of the principles of building science in the apprenticeship programs. And another finding that is, I think, particularly relevant for Canada is that the European countries with the most advanced climate training programs are those in Northern Europe that are based on social partnerships. And by social partnerships, we mean programs in which labor and employers work jointly together to promote a highly skilled and highly productive workforce. So there's a significant role for labor in those jurisdictions where climate issues are being incorporated into the curriculum of their apprenticeship programs. New slide, please. Okay, I'm going to turn briefly to the Canadian and US experience here. Climate change is still somewhat controversial in the United States, and progress has been patchy. However, we did find organizations such as the US Green Building Council had developed some of the most innovative climate curriculum. It's called GPRO, and it provides custom-tailored curriculum modules for individual construction trades, such as electricians, carpenters, and plumbers, and a number of unions in the US are using GPRO. In both Canada and the US community benefits agreements and project agreements are also starting to include climate material. A good Canadian example is the BC Infrastructure Benefits Agreement with the construction trades in BC. It includes climate literature modules, which are now being delivered to all its new employees as part of their orientation package. Quebec's trades training system is very different from the rest of the country. Although climate change has not been a priority, its public training system has great potential for delivering a comprehensive climate curriculum, and we're hoping that there'll be more work done in the very near future in that area. In all jurisdictions, implementing climate literacy requires support beyond what can be delivered in the classroom. In particular, employers need to support and reinforce what apprentices learn in the classroom about environmental and climate issues to connect the dots again in terms of what actually happens on job sites and not just in the classroom. There are also some new insights and lessons. So can we move to the next slide, please? As I mentioned a few minutes ago, public policy is a key to seeing our progress in this area. And that's been reflected in Canada in the increasingly tough building and energy codes that are now in place. And in Canada, we've also seen a growing number of progressive companies who are greening their projects and their work practices. I can name, for example, Passive House Canada, the Canadian Green Building Council, and organizations that have supported this, such as Efficiency Canada, who have been leaders in moving the industry towards net zero. But much of the industry is still wedded to low bid, low cost practices, which fail to recognize the much higher standards required to implement effective high performance construction. Many workers, too many workers actually, still do not have access to apprenticeship programs, and we still have a large unregulated underground economy where workers get virtually no access to training whatsoever. The market is not providing the appropriate signals for the industry transformation that is needed, and that's why governments have been intervening so significantly in recent years. Some of the things that need to be done, for example, are comprehensive energy audits, energy labeling, and energy conservation targets for buildings, something they already have in Europe. Progress is also dependent on those purchasing buildings to demand higher climate and environmental standards. Purchasers determine what gets built and what workers are asked or allowed to do, so they play a key role. In addition, governments, in terms of their procurement policies, can also play a very positive role in providing good examples for the industry as to what is possible. But change goes beyond energy efficiency now to include the carbon content of materials, water conservation, the environmental life cycle of projects, waste management, and increasingly occupational health issues for workers and occupant health for people who are living and working in the buildings that the construction industry produces. We're talking increasingly about a circular economy and a circular industry. Change is coming, and it's essential that the workforce is prepared for it. But climate literacy currently is not a core part of the apprenticeship curriculum. However, we have seen quite recently that the Red Seal Secretariat has made an important step in this direction by including it with its recent statement on the need for climate literacy in the trades. And we're seeing that will eventually, I think, filter down to what's happening in all of the trades training programs across the country. The industry and its workforce can play a critical role in addressing climate change. They are a major part of the solution, as Sean indicated. Addressing climate change in construction can also provide thousands of new, well-paid, satisfying careers for apprentices, as well as renewing the industry with young workers to address the large number of people who will be retiring in the next decade. But in addition to that, we need to ensure that there's an adequate focus on jobs themselves. And that means jobs that provide workers with the opportunity to develop their human capacity, to have agency, and to have some control over what they do. The European experience points to the need for public policies that are designed to provide construction workers with decent work and challenging work and a long-term career in the industry. We don't need more short-term precarious work assignments based on limited skills that do not lead to a proper career in the industry. Teaching apprentices how to do high-performance construction work is not new, as was indicated earlier. The system has been doing this for years. What is new is teaching why climate goals now need to be a central feature of the construction process. Doing work that is socially and environmentally valuable can be a major source of job satisfaction for workers and a major motivator to do work properly. We need to encourage a workforce culture and a working environment that promotes these kinds of values, a system that recognizes how important the work of the building trades is and will be in achieving Canada's climate goals. Thank you, and I'd like to turn this back now to Lindsay to turn it over to the next presenter.
Thanks very much, John. Appreciate it. Now we're going to have a chance to hear, and this is the presentation that we'll hear before we get a sneak peek into the curriculum. We're just really wanting to give you all a sense of how the effort that we put into developing the content and figuring out what we needed before we went ahead and developed curriculum and programming. So you're gonna have a chance to hear now from Patrick Ray. He's a senior research associate with Social Research and Demonstration Corporation. Patrick has over 15 years experience in the development and management of social research initiatives. He has research expertise in the areas of training and employment, public health, disability, international development, and agriculture. Since joining SRDC in 2019, Mr. Ray has worked on several research projects on training and skills programs, as well as employment initiatives. Patrick has a master's in international affairs and a graduate certificate in program evaluation. And I'll hand it over to Patrick to speak to us a little bit about the initial research and evaluation and the evaluation that will be ongoing throughout the project so that we can measure and evaluate impact. Over to you, Patrick. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Lindsay, and good afternoon, everybody. And I'm very pleased to be speaking here today. So I'm going to get right started. Actually, if you could go back one slide, sorry. There's 3 things I would like to discuss with you today. I will first provide some of the results of our discussions with key stakeholders as what we've been talking about as the needs analysis. I will then provide an overview of the Building It Green theory of change. And finally, I will briefly outline the research framework for how we're measuring program success. So the purpose, next slide, please. So the purpose of the needs analysis is to identify from the perspective of key stakeholders, including leaders in green building construction, apprentices, journey persons, and trainers, the specific training needs of the Canadian construction sector as it pertains to climate literacy. These findings have been critical to helping the Building It Green team to inform curriculum design and development, as well as the optimal way to deliver the program. And I want to emphasize that the needs analysis process doesn't just happen at one point in time, but it's an ongoing process that began with CERT's work and will continue throughout the duration of the project. So the first findings I would like to discuss are related to our discussions with whom we're calling super greens. And super greens are leaders in green building across the country and include trainers, training directors, architects, builders, and contractors. During these discussions, interviewees highlighted that the technical skills required for green building reflect those required for good building in general, and that they also emphasize that generally these skills are being taught in the current apprenticeship system and are being acquired by tradespeople. There are, of course, always new technology and skills that need to be adapted to, including those related to green building, but that this has always been a part of the apprenticeship system. However, they also emphasize that tradespeople are missing education and awareness about what carbon is, why it is important to reduce embodied carbon in materials, and how to ensure the integrity of the building envelope. Essentially, tradespeople are being taught the technical skills of, but not being taught about how their work relates to climate change. And I just wanted to provide one example because I thought it was a very good one. So one super green individual emphasized the importance of trade workers understanding how their work fits with the broader picture or context. And they provided the analogy of the story of the bricklayer, of one bricklayer who is focused specifically on laying their bricks in a correct and conscientious manner, but another bricklayer who understands their specific tasks, but also that they're building a hospital, or they're building kind of a bigger part of a bigger project. The one who understands the bigger picture is going to have developed a broader understanding of how their particular task fits in with the broader project goals. The Super Greens also emphasize that tradespeople need to be empowered to incorporate climate considerations on the job site. This means providing tradespeople with the knowledge around climate change, but also the tools they need to navigate implementing this knowledge on the work site. They also emphasize that young people may be drawn to jobs that contribute to improving the environment, which is critical for recruiting young people into the sector. Next slide. So as also part of the needs analysis, we held discussions with a number of group of apprentices and journey workers. And first, and this is very important to emphasize, overall participants had a strong knowledge of climate change and an interest in learning more. They hadn't necessarily had formal education related to climate change, learning mostly through media such as TV, internet, and social media, but nonetheless were aware of the impact of climate change on their lives and were able to provide examples of how the work they do pertains to climate change. They also made it clear that although not necessarily the most important motivator for them in joining the trades, making an environmental impact in their job was important to them. However, despite this general interest in climate change, participants also noted a perception that climate change does not necessarily apply to the day-to-day activities of their job. The environment is not something that they necessarily think of during the day-to-day activities on site. They also mentioned a lack of agency in terms of being able to make changes on the job site. However, participants did mention that good workmanship and following protocol were important to them and also their trade in general, and that this can be viewed as an effective for reducing environmental impact. So I just want to emphasize that these are some examples of some of the discussions that we've had with stakeholders, and CERT also already mentioned their discussions, and the next presenter will also have some examples of discussions with trainers and training directors. So I'm now going to talk about the theory of change. And I know this diagram looks a little complex probably, but I'm going to break it down after this slide. We'll break it down and I'll kind of go through this with everybody. But a theory of change describes the steps between the activities of a program and the goals it aims to achieve. It is meant to describe the long-term goals of the program and work back to identify the short and medium-term outcomes along the way. So essentially, how do the project's activities reach to the end goal, which is a reduction in emissions and a healthier Canada? The theory of change also underpins the evaluation by helping to identify indicators and potential data sources that we'll use to measure progress towards the achievement of program goals. The theory of change was developed based on CERT's literature review and environmental scan, and the work of the needs analysis being conducted by SRDC and Skill Plan. And I'll now go through a bit of the detail of the theory of change. So the first is around program context. And in terms of program context, Canada is committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In March 2022, the Government of Canada introduced Canada's 2030 Emissions Reduction Plan. This reduction plan provides a roadmap for the Canadian economy to achieve 40 to 45% emissions reductions below 2005 levels by 2030. In addition, the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act, which became law in 2001, enshrines in legislation Canada's commitment to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. And the building sector can play a key positive role, as John already discussed. The building sector can play a key positive role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. 13% of Canada's GHG emissions are from the building sector, and this moves up to 18% if including electricity-related emissions. However, we must also acknowledge that there are multiple factors at play in terms of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions in the construction sector. So some of these other factors are government policy, as we've already seen, building codes, financial incentives, design, technology, culture, and contractor control and compliance. And the last kind of box is that this project specifically focuses on new knowledge and skills that are required for trade workers to excel at low carbon construction. So this next slide gets into the details on the specific outcomes that the project is aiming to achieve. The end of training outcomes will be the primary focus for the evaluation, whereas the longer term outcomes are somewhat more difficult to measure due to their long duration. So in terms of end outcomes, the program focuses on changing knowledge, skills, and attitude. In terms of knowledge, it aims to increase knowledge of climate change and the role of the construction sector, greater understanding of buildings as a system, as well as the connection between trade work and climate change. In terms of skills, we aim to improve understanding and application of building science, improve essential skills such as problem solving and collaboration, and for trainers specifically, greater ability to teach climate literacy. And in terms of attitudes, we aim to increase motivation in applying green building practices and increase confidence in knowledge of climate change and green building practices. And the training outcomes include behavioral change, which is essentially what trade workers will be doing differently on site, and then some broader areas and impacts related to employment impacts, culture change, climate consciousness, and empowerment. And now I'll talk a bit about some of the goals and processes of the evaluation itself. And there are two key goals to the evaluation. The first is supporting the program to continually learn and improve program delivery. It aims to understand what are the strengths and weaknesses of program delivery and how they influence the success of the program. For trainers' involvement in the evaluation, this involves understanding trainers' pre-training knowledge, attitudes, and teaching methods related to climate change, as there likely is significant variation among different trainers. Some trainers may have already been teaching climate change for a period of time, whereas others might not have had that experience. It also involves understanding their opinions on how to improve the training methods and materials, and also understanding how engaged trainers are in the training and how to increase engagement. And then finally, the amount and type of curriculum that is actually implemented by trainers. For apprentices and journey workers, this involves understanding how many hours of instruction related to climate literacy they participated in, their opinions on how to improve the training and materials, and their level of engagement in training and how to increase their engagement. And research methods for this part of the evaluation involve surveys used to understand instructors' pre-training history, train the trainer training, and how the different training programs have been implemented. We'll also do interviews and focus groups to provide an in-depth understanding of what is working well and what could be improved. The second goal related to the evaluation is measuring program success and understanding to what extent the training has achieved its objectives. And the research methods for this area include pre and post training surveys that compare objective measures before and after the training, assess the effectiveness based on stakeholders' opinions, and we try to control for as many factors as possible outside of the realm of the program. And one example is instructors' pre-training knowledge, as we already discussed, and teaching methods. We will also conduct interviews and focus groups that aim for a more in-depth understanding of program outcomes. And as I mentioned, the primary outcomes that we're going to be looking at through the research is change in knowledge, change in skills and attitudes and behavior related to implementing climate literacy. And then also in terms of trainers, their skills related to teaching climate literacy in their courses. Thank you very much. And I'll pass it back now to Lindsay.
Thanks so much, Patrick. Appreciate that. And now we're getting to the portion of the presentation today, and thank you again for all of you that have joined the webinar and have stayed on. We're now at the part of the webinar where you're going to get a sneak peek reveal into the training and course content itself. And Christina Porta will be walking us through this. Christina is an instructional design specialist with SkillPlan. She has played a large role in the design and development of several of SkillPlan's online and in-person training programs, including trade math, science, and managing test anxiety. She enthusiastically joined the Building It Green project team, as climate change and climate literacy are topics that are close to her heart. Christina brings with her more than 20 years of experience in instruction, curriculum design, and material development in a range of sectors, both in Canada and internationally. Christina will walk through the program design, development, and implementation. She'll also provide a short review of the foundations course, the train the trainer, and trade-specific course content we are developing. Over to you, Christina.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, so my job today is to go over each of these pieces and explain the overarching model. And so if you could go to the next slide, thank you. I just wanted to point out that this isn't just one course that we've developed in this program, but we've developed a learning path for the different people or the target groups involved. And you could see that our groups that we are targeting in these materials are apprentices, journey people, and then the trainers who will be teaching apprentices. Based on all of the research from the climate industry research team and from SRDC through their needs analysis, a lot of information was gathered, and it was our job to organize it into a learning path for each of these groups. And because of what you heard earlier, people in the trades have a lot of the technical skills and know how to implement green buildings. But what's missing for many is a general knowledge about climate change and the internet connections between climate change and the building industry. And for that reason, everybody's learning path we found really should start with a foundations of climate change and how it is connected to the job on the construction site. And so you can see there are a number of different pieces in this path, but the first pit stop for everybody is this online self-directed foundations course. And I'm going to be going through highlights of the content of that course and also the kinds of activities that you'd expect if you were to take it. And just as a reminder, I think it's been said a few times throughout the last hour that this material was developed with tradespeople. So in addition to the research and the needs analysis, our team also held focus groups with subject matter experts for each of the trades so that we could really take a deep dive into the specifics of what they do every day on the job site to reduce carbon emissions and mitigate climate change. And we learned that it's really a lot. There are barriers, of course, to reducing carbon emissions on the job, but we also found that there are a lot of opportunities, and we've learned a lot about what is actually being done. And we've been able to connect that to the learning and the theory and the foundations of climate change so that the course that we have developed is relevant to people in the construction and building trades and not just a general course on climate change and its importance. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on the Building It Green Foundations course, which again is for all of the target groups involved. This course is online and it's self-directed, and it takes, we estimate around 2 to 2.5 hours to work your way through all of the modules. And the reason why we went with online for this foundations course is because it can be accessed everywhere. In interviews with subject matter experts, we've realized that not everybody can make it to a classroom. And so, having this online and with the ability to, do it in chunks as you go was an important factor in making that decision. So some of the highlights, the content is specific to construction industry across the country. And so when you go through the course, you'll be able to see, for example, focuses on projects that building trades have been involved in or could be involved in the future, which really are, represent a shift towards green energy or green building practices. So you might be able to go through and go into detail on this slide that showcases some projects like Muskrat Falls on the East Coast, some Bruce Power in Ontario, and then also a geothermal energy plant in Alberta. And so people can go in and learn a little bit more about what kinds of projects and opportunities are out there in green energy. And then on the next slide, you'll also be able to see that there are interactive slides and activities that help people get into the basics of what climate change is, what the greenhouse effect is, and how increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has intensified that, and what the connection is to industry and to construction. So we've tried to make it interactive with process slides like this one, where you can click on each of the stages and learn about the greenhouse effect as you go without getting into too much detail or too deep into the science. We also have interactive questions throughout the modules, such as this one, "What do you think?" questions, which help people to kind of consider what they already know about climate change. And I think if you look at this question, most people would probably be able to answer this one correctly. But there are other questions that are more thought-provoking and kind of get people into the frame of mind for the content that's coming up in the modules that they're learning. Other things that we've done, if you go to the next slide, is integrate examples and scenarios of things that workers might actually encounter on the job site. Situations where they might have to make decisions that actually have an impact on energy use, carbon emissions, and the climate. And this kind of scenario really helps workers see how what they do every day actually can impact the climate. And they're taken through a number of different scenarios, which are trade specific. So they can see the work that they do in these situations, from iron workers to operating engineers to glaziers and painters. And they can see what people are doing in other trades and how their work affects people in other trades and vice versa. So really interactive, practical scenario that is really relevant to what they're doing. Another thing that makes this course, I think, relevant to the trades is some video interviews that we've conducted with some people from our advisory committee. So you'll recognize Mike Gordon here, who's talking about the importance of collaboration between workers in different trades and how collaboration can really lead to a reduction in mistakes, a reduction in rework, a reduction in waste, and what that means in terms of climate benefits. And so, being able to see and hear leaders in different unions and different trades talk about this importance really underlines, how important this shift is. And so if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the different kinds of levels of information that are available. This is a course for apprentices who are just starting out, but it's also a course for trainers. And what we've done is added layers of information that people can discover as they're going through. So somebody who might not have a good foundation or understanding of climate change might, be able to go through and see, click on vocabulary or terms that they don't feel very confident or familiar with, and read definitions. So what you're seeing right now is not the interactive course, but a screenshot taken from it. And if it was the interactive course, I'd be able to click on that word mitigate and get a definition and be reminded what it means. Same thing with adapt. And that might be useful for someone who doesn't have much climate knowledge, or anybody who just needs a reminder as they're going through. And if we go to the next slide, you'll also see that, as the topic of climate change is very scientific, and in some circles, it's also very controversial. And so what we've made sure to do throughout this is give sources whenever there's facts, whenever there's information, whenever people think, well, where did they get this? Is this a reliable source? How can I learn more about it? They can click on these little green icons as they go through so that they can, go down those rabbit holes and learn more. And this is something we think will be really valuable for trainers who might later on start integrating these materials into their training. One of the things we did learn as we were talking to trainers is that some of them didn't feel comfortable talking about climate change in their training facility with their apprentices, and felt like they needed a lot more background knowledge before introducing the topic in their classroom. And hopefully something like this will give them the background knowledge and the confidence that they need to start broaching these topics with people in their classrooms. And so I've talked a little bit about the what you could expect to see on each of the slides. And I just wanted to give an overview of the content of the Foundations course as well. So it has 5 different modules, and these are generally the topics in each of them. The first being an explanation of the benefits of shifting to low carbon construction for tradespeople. And so what this means is, opportunities in green building, opportunities in net zero, and also understanding that a green job is the job that they've been doing. It just means maybe, working in their trade, but on different kinds of projects in the future than the ones that they've been working on. The second module is a bit of a dive into, could you go back? A bit of a it's a bit of a dive into climate change and its relationship to the construction industry. So this is where you'd learn about carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions, and how the Earth's temperature has been increasing since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and what it means for our future. And then the third module, it gets more into the problem solving of, what is green energy? What are the sustainable materials that are coming up and we could start using in our projects? And what are the green building practices that people in each trade have been doing all this time, and that we need to make people more aware of so they practice them more consistently. The fourth module makes that connection to an individual tradesperson's job. What are the things I can do as a tradesperson on the work site to make a difference? And that's where all of those examples come in that our subject matter experts provided us with during our sharing sessions. And our last module is on what success looks like. So when we start making this shift and making these changes, what kinds of quality differences are we going to see in the buildings we live in, in the built environment, and in the climate. Yeah, and so that's the foundations course in a nutshell. And the next little bit that I'd like to get into is the trade-specific modules. And just to give you a reminder of how that fits into the delivery module, if you could go to the next slide. I've already talked about the foundations course, and that each group would be going through that. After that, their paths differ a little bit, and where these trade-specific modules fit into the bigger picture is in the Train the Trainer workshop. So when trainers go through the foundations course and then go on to the next step, which is their Train the Trainer workshop, they'll also be given access to and work their way through these trade-specific modules, and a whole library of them, actually, which that they could then use to integrate into their trades training with apprentices. They're ready to go modules that you could, use as is, or they could be adapted in certain places in the trades training curriculum where you see fit. And that's something, that we'd be able to discuss and discover as we're, going through the materials. So at this point, there are two different trade-specific modules. One topic is energy efficiency and conservation, and the other one is protecting the natural environment, which gets into the carbon cycle and how carbon is being released into the atmosphere through different kinds of construction activities, and how that can be reversed or prevented. So I'm going to take you through one of the trade-specific modules, a few highlights from that one. This one has been developed specifically for operating engineers, and it will be revised and changed to fit each trade as we go through the rest of this project. For operating engineers, you'll see that these materials not only, have the look of, what the operating engineers do, but the examples, the information, and the activities are specifically tailored for operating engineers. Each of these modules are meant to be done in person, first in the Train the Trainer workshop, and then in apprenticeship training. And they're divided into two sections. So in the first section, there are concepts like energy efficiency, energy conservation. And because this is meant for in-person delivery, there are a lot of interactive elements, discussions, and activities. There are some similarities to the foundations course, like these "what do you think" questions, which asks questions like this one, to get conversations started and start thinking about, why we use as much energy as we do, and, how that can be changed. Other activities might be one like this, where operating engineers are asked how energy is actually used in their jobs, and not just in the process of doing their jobs, like ground disturbance activities, but also in the operations of their workplaces, and also in the environment that they're building. So how can different, for example, road building techniques affect energy use by people who take those roads when they're done? And so we go into a bit of a deep dive on how energy is used, And then following up with the reasons why and how it can be reduced. So there's a video, which you can see on the next slide, which gets into like the real impact of saving energy. You know, how when we save a certain number of watts, what that actually means in terms of real savings in the energy grid when you take into account all the energy that's lost through production and transportation of energy to the place where it's used. There are other interactivities where, you know, people are asked to think about different energy efficient technologies. And then in the next slide, you'll be able to see the second section of that module, which really gets into the actions that individual operating engineers can take to reduce fuel usage, to reduce idling. And we found that idling is one of the biggest things that contribute to carbon emissions from day-to-day work activities amongst operating engineers on site. And then on the next slide, you'll see just a reminder that, you know, the examples in these modules are tailored to the people who will be in the classroom, so to operating engineers. Yeah, and so that's a highlight of these trade-specific modules. Right now, as Lindsay said, they're being validated by, you know, as subject matter experts that we talk to for accuracy and also for relevance, and they should be ready for train the trainer workshop in the coming weeks and months. These modules are for the trainer accompanied by a trainer's guide. So if you take a look at the next slide, you'll see we've developed a trainer's guide that will help trainers with thank you, trainer's guide that it goes slide by slide with instructions, tips, and activity instructions as they go, and there's a handout for participants. So it's kind of like a ready-made package for trainers to take into apprenticeship training and use. Finally, the last piece that I'd like to talk about today is the Train the Trainer workshop. These trade-specific modules will be part of the Train the Trainer workshop. And the Train the Trainer workshop is to be in person. And if you go to the next slide, we'll be able to see just the structure. Right now we have it set for either a 1 or 2 day in-person delivery. It can be trade specific. So for example, if you know you have a group of iron workers who want to take the training, we would be able to take them through the trade specific modules for iron workers as part of that day. And we understand that in some cases that it might be a mixed audience. So a mixed group of trainers who go, and we also have mixed trade modules. So we're quite flexible in terms of, you know, how these materials can be delivered to trainers. And what a 1-day workshop would look like after the welcome and the overview. It would be a bit of a deeper dive and reminder of, you know, the content they've learned in the foundations course, connecting, you know, being able to discuss and think about what climate change means to them and the impact in their personal lives, their communities, and their jobs. We'd be able to examine the trainer's resource library, so those trade-specific modules for their trade, go through them and think about how they can be integrated into their curriculum. And then another important part of that day will be tips on, you know, how to discuss climate change with a mixed group, people you don't necessarily know. and how to answer frequently asked questions about it, what sources of information on climate change are reliable, and how to access them. And so the one-day workshop, we hope will be, not just talking about the materials that we can integrate into the course, but really give you a rounded training and how to talk about these materials and how to engage in conversations around climate change from people who look at it from a variety of perspectives. And I think that's the last slide that I have today. So I'm going to hand it back to Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Christina. And as you can see, we have a lot of passionate people working on this project, Christina included, and we've put a lot of thought and effort into doing this the right way and developing it with the right people. And so we're really excited now. We are in the pilot stage of the project. So for the next year, we're going to be rolling out the pilots. And we do have 2 piloting organizations that are underway right now. So I wanted to make a special mention for the mainland building trades in Nova Scotia, who are piloting with us right now with their trades instructors, as well as a pilot through an employee orientation through the British Columbia infrastructure benefits. So far, we've heard some really great feedback from instructors, including an IBEW training director from Nova Scotia, Jordy Walsh, who said that he really enjoyed learning how the different trades are adopting various strategies to mitigate climate change and how the trades can work together. So I think a lot of tradespeople are finding, when they're viewing the course, they're finding it interesting to learn about what the other trades are doing and how the trades can work together. He found the course easy to follow, well-designed, and with clearly defined objectives to help guide his learning. He is going to be recommending the course to his members. He wants his members to learn about the effects of climate change, be informed about all of the ways the construction industry can do its part, and be prepared to contribute towards positive change. So it's great for us to hear good feedback from instructors. That's most important to us. We really want this product to be utilized and to be effective. So over the next year, we're going to be piloting the course. The foundations course is available now, and we will be, as we roll out throughout the year, we'll be completing the trade-specific courses as we work with each trade to validate those. Although there is an initial mixed trade specific course available now through the Train the Trainer program. So to enroll, you can scan the QR code, you can go to the link, we'll put the website link in our chat. You can visit us at our website, and all the information, resources are there. All of the project information, project reports, like our interim report, a one-pager handout, and in the near future, we'll have all of the final research reports from the climate industry research team as well. To enroll, there are 2 enrollment options. You can either enroll as an individual or as a group, like a training center or a local. The steps are listed all on the website. There's a step-by-step guide on the website to guide the registrants through the process. And for training centers and instructors, we can provide train the trainer sessions as outlined by Christina, so that instructors are really supported in the implementation of this training within their existing curriculum. And as I mentioned earlier, there is mixed trade content available now. And as trade specific is validated, it will appear on the learning management system to be accessed by the instructors who have taken the Train the Trainer program. And we are, as a group, as project partners and CB2, we are happy to provide information sessions, presentations, tutorials, whatever you need to your locals, your training centers, your boards. We are happy to do so to provide more information. And throughout the piloting phase, we will be collecting data and research with short surveys from the SRDC team to make sure that we are evaluating the impact of the training. And at the very end of the project, we will have a final report along with all of the curriculum material, the modules, and this will all be stored in a digital repository system where all of these excellent resources will be found. But of course, we really are hoping to expand this project. This is only the beginning for Building It Green. We want to continue this great work. And we can't do it without all of you and those of you that are engaged in this project and are taking the pilot. We really appreciate your contributions, and we're excited to work together in the future. And so please reach out and contact us with any questions. We have a good small chunk of time here to go through a few questions that we've received through our Q&A. If we didn't get to your question, we do have your name, so we'll be able to get to these. We'll be able to answer you offline, or again, you can contact us through the website and we'll get to all of your questions. But with that, I do want to get to a couple questions that we have here because they are great questions. And I'm going to actually call on Mike to answer. There's two questions that I'm going to combine into one question. One of the questions was, is the government in Ontario going to allow this to be part of the curriculum? And then someone else messaged through the chat, and I'll just read this out loud. You mentioned that one of the end of training outcomes should be the ability for trainers to deliver more climate change related content or increased climate change related. Sorry, that was repetitive. Since all apprenticeship training is regulated by provincial and territorial jurisdictional authorities and not easily changed or updated, how do you see climate change related content being added to existing apprenticeship standards across the country? Are you hopeful that the online self-directed course will become mandatory in all apprenticeship programs, or will the course be voluntary, supplementary learning that all skilled trades workers could access in addition to formal apprenticeship education? So I'm rolling those two into one and handing that over to Mike to answer for us.
Well, there's a lot there,
Yeah.
Lindsay, and with the timelines, I'll try to be cautious of that. And Dean, I see you've chatted in there, and I'd love to answer a bit of that question as well. I'll speak on what I have limited authorization to be able to speak on behalf of all affiliates. I think this is a thing that should be circled back through CBTU, all of these great questions, and see what an action plan could be for the next steps. But I'll start by saying this. Typically, all of the affiliates of the CBTU are involved in every capacity as stewards of our trades, on trade boards, Red Seal workshops, provincial advisory committees, across the board, codes and standards committees. So there's an opportunity here, twofold, a reciprocal opportunity. If we're not there, invite us. That's one. The second thing is that when we are invited, we bring this knowledge to the table, and that's when we can bring it forward and include it, not just with words on paper, but with context, with the experts for each of the appropriate trades. That's how I would kind of generally answer that. And you know, to speak to the question specifically to Ontario, again, I reside in Ontario, very familiar with the systems there. And listen, you know, it's only if we're there that we can help to impact and make positive changes. So, you know, I'm speaking from a national standpoint, from a jurisdictional standpoint, we're there to help. But I do believe the next step to be able to give specific answers that are actionable is to circle that back, Lindsay, to Sean and the advisory board, and get the feedback from all of those that use their expertise to build this. It wasn't just the funding. There was a lot of voluntary expertise brought to the table. The funding was to be able to pull the things together and put it on one platform. So I'm not sure. Also, cost was listed there. Those are all questions that I think I'm not equipped to answer, but I certainly think they're worth review, if that makes any sense. And if I may, just short words over to Dean. Dean, nice to see that you're on here. And you know, to your question, just keep us in the room, and we'll be there to help.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. And I don't expect you to answer all the questions. As for cost, we had a couple of those questions rolling in. There's no charge for our building trades members and instructors to take this course. This is why we have applied for Union Training Innovation Program funding, so that we're able to provide this course to our members. So I hope that, and there's no minimum number of attendees, although if we're going to do a train the trainer, we hope to get at least a few together at once. So I hope that answers that. And I do actually have a question that I do want to just send over to Christina. How do you plan at Skill Plan, those that are the the hosts and the developers of this content, how do you plan on keeping these modules updated? And yeah, how do you plan on keeping these updated? Information is going to change, industry is going to change, processes and policies are going to change. How are you going to keep this current?
That's a great question. I mean, the great thing about this is that all the materials are hosted on our learning management system, and so we'll be able to update them as need be. And we've actually already updated the materials a few times based on feedback from subject matter experts and other people who have looked at the materials and given us more information. Climate change is something, it's a hot topic right now, as it should be, and more information is coming to light all the time. And so that's something we'll be on top of, especially since, there are live links to sources in these materials, and that's something we're going to have to keep on top of, just to make sure that, when you do want to learn more about any of the topics or subtopics in the course, that when you hit that link, it's live and it takes you where you want to go. So that's something, that our team is going to be on top of.
Thanks, Christina. I'm looking, there's quite a few questions rolling in. I don't think we're going to get to all of them. But just quickly, this presentation will be available. We are recording it. You will get the PowerPoint slides, and we are accessible to answer your questions after this webinar. I do have a question again, and this, I don't want to put any of my panelists on the spot. And I might have a call on John and Mike, one of you, to answer this question, because I think it is a good one. You mentioned, John, I know you mentioned specifically in your remarks that the need to stop low bid environment in construction. Does this mean that addressing climate change will make bids more costly?
Did you
Good
want to?
question. Something I'll jump in, and Mike, you can follow if that's okay.
Yep.
Yep. In a few cases, that may be the case. One of the problems we've got is that in terms of the bidding process, we have to think about how long construction outputs, that is buildings, are actually going to be in place. And if you're thinking very short term, it may be a bit cheaper to do it. But in the long term, if you're looking at having a building that's properly built, that's energy efficient, and that in the long term is really going to provide a whole range of benefits, initially that may be slightly more expensive, but in the long term, it's actually cheaper to do it right. So that would be my sort of very quick answer to that. And just to reinforce that, I mean, I think one of the things that we've learned from the European experience is that the quality of construction work is very important. You cannot do high quality construction work with a very sort of downward pressing low bid system. You've got to include quality in the actual tender documents to ensure that the work gets done properly. And that obviously means you need to have a workforce that's properly trained to do it. So Mike, you may have some further thoughts on this as well.
Thank you, John. You took some of the words right out of my mouth. There's a few layers to unpack there. Awareness on a larger scale, I think, investors being able to be familiar and see how that is. Unfortunately, a lot of times when we look at, lead projects, some of the first things to go during the bid process, if we're looking to chop down the costing, is going to be some of the things that would get us the efficiencies that we're seeking. So there's a few layers, and from the top down and the bottom up, codes and standards are continuously improving. And when it becomes a requirement, we'll get there faster. The goal of LEED and other similar initiatives is to continuously raise the bar so that we can get closer to a net zero. But initial costs, it's been proven. There's various studies out there that you can look up that have proof that confirm your statements there, John, that you're either playing the short game or the long game. And what is it that we're looking for here? If I may, I'd love to just mention to Dan's point here. I see Dan Shelley talking about the efforts to link the upgraded education of the existing trade license. So this is an add-on, not a takeaway. 100% agree. I think myself and all building trades affiliates have this, from our conversations that we've had, is that when we use the word micro credentials, that it's only utilized as an add-on, not a takeaway. The prerequisite for these type of programs should be that you're registered in the trade, either a potential participant in the trade. So there's some promotional things on the side here trying to garner interest to get into this. So people that maybe don't realize this other incentive to join the trades and the value of the trades, this might draw them to it. Well, maybe the fundamentals piece is a good fit for that. But it's always any training for the building trades. We always look at it as an add-on, in that there's a prerequisite so that we increase the value of a red seal trade, not detract from it. We're not trying to create smaller segmented piece of the trades. And again, to John's point about we only get one chance with the reputation of getting these things done right. You have underqualified people taking short courses to become a certificate holder, and going out and doing a tradesperson's license work. We risk the fact that we lose that buy-in from the public, from clients and owners to invest where there is that additional upfront investment, to take that leap that the system works, because all it takes is one bad system to skew the opinions and going in that direction.
Thanks, Mike. With 1 minute remaining, I'm going to answer 2 questions myself. And one of them is, do you have any Train the Trainer sessions scheduled already for interested folks in Alberta? We do not. Please enroll via our website. We would love to work with you. And then the last question that I will answer is from my friend Lyle Daniels, who is on the webinar today, and he's asking about the inclusion of an Indigenous perspective in this course. And I think that's actually great timing on that question, Lyle. We've been talking internally as as a group on this project, in light of our Indigenous awareness course that we'll be launching soon, our virtual course. We have been talking about incorporating how do we incorporate Indigenous perspectives into this course, and vice versa. How do we incorporate climate change perspectives in the Indigenous awareness training course? So we are having those conversations now, and we will connect with you, and we will connect with other Indigenous folks to figure out how best to approach this. But that is something that we have been discussing recently. So thanks so much for your question. And with that, it's right on time. We're going to end the webinar. Thank you so much to everyone who have joined us today. We really appreciate it. Please contact us with your questions, enroll, sign up for those pilots, and we look forward to working with you. Thanks so much to my panelists as well for joining us. Thanks.